In this video, we're going to talk about pie charts and bar graphs. Okay, so I have two examples here, and I mean, you could kind of loosely draw this on your notes if you'd like. I'd understand if that's kind of difficult, so it's okay if you don't. But I'm interested in kind of looking at these in general. As you can kind of see, they're very generalized. There's no real information, but what I might be interested in kind of when I look at this first one, the pie chart here, which this is a pie chart. um, is kind of comparing those wedges or slices, however you want to kind of term that. So which one looks biggest and which one looks smallest? That's kind of what you'd be interested in when you're looking at a pie chart. Okay, so when I kind of look at this pie chart, I actually see that the red wedge and the blue wedge are very close, right? They almost look the same. And in fact, I had to get a ruler to see if one was bigger than the other. And the answer is, yeah, the bigger one is the blue one. Okay. So the largest wedge is blue or category, whatever blue represents. And then the smallest appears to be green, in my opinion. I think that looks a little bit smaller than purple. And I think it's a little bit more noticeable than the two bigger ones. Okay, so that's kind of what we look at when we look at the pie chart. Now, what the pie chart represents, and this is important, is it represents percentages. So when I look at this, I'm thinking in terms of percents. And when I kind of look at the blue and the red, like by themselves, like they almost look like they take up maybe a third of the pie chart, each and of themselves. Like, I mean, there's a tiny difference between them. So maybe one of them is 34% and the other one's 32%, right? 33.3% is a third. Okay. So, or 33% is about a third. But I'm kind of looking at them in terms of percentages. So I would guess that blue is maybe like 34%. I'm making it a little bit bigger than a third. And then let's see, the green wedge, oh, maybe it looks like it's a fourth of whatever 34% is. Oh, I don't know, maybe like 9%, 8%, somewhere like that. Okay. It's kind of hard to make those guesses. I could, though, get like a protractor and actually measure out the angles and figure it out. Like I really could, because this is supposed to total up to 360 degrees. I'm not going to do that. We're not going to get that precise, but that's what the pie chart represents. Is it represents percentages. Okay, now over here, the bar graph. And the bars on the bar graph are the rectangles above those categories. Okay, the bar graph, usually it could represent either the actual what they call frequency, the number of occurrences in each category, or percent. It could be either. I'll write that down in just a second. But in this case, the largest is a little bit easier to see. The largest is the category A, and then the smallest would be D. A little bit easier to see that. Okay, now this could be or could represent total in each category, which in this case could be like 100 or 50, right? Okay. But it also could do percentages. So it really could do both. Its strength, though, it's best when you're doing it as representing the total in each category. In other words, if I were to bother like creating like a vertical axis here, right? And actually give some values and be like, okay, that's actually 10. And, now I have like tick marks I can draw to figure out approximately how much is in each category, right? Like that's a little bit more valuable than looking at the percentages. So that's the strength of bar graphs versus pie charts. Pie charts are good for when you're comparing part to whole comparisons. So it's best for what we'll call part to whole comparisons. And that's because they're percentages. So you're talking about looking at how much something is compared to the whole 100%. Okay. Bar graphs are best when you're doing what's called part to part comparisons, category to category. So part to part comparisons. Okay, so that's when it's best. Now, if I told you that these two graphs are actually representing the same information, that actually kind of makes it interesting because now I can tell why blue and red are so close in size to each other, because on the bar chart or bar graph, they look very close, right? They look very close together. So if I were to kind of take a moment and like label all of these, I would say then, I'll use my blue, why not? That the blue category, as I said, was the biggest, so it would be A. The red category would be B. This would be C, D, and E. So if I were to actually label them. And what's kind of cool is they just kind of show a little bit better, you know, A and B are the two dominant ones where the other three combined together kind of total up to what A and B are, right, individually. And you can kind of see that over the bar chart comparison, but the bar chart comparison really helps us see which category is the biggest and which one's the smallest. It does a better job when you're comparing each category to each other, whereas the pie chart does a better job comparing it as a whole, looking at them all together and kind of viewing what they do working together. All right. Let me give an example of when it might be more appropriate to use a pie chart versus a bar graph. So like, what if you were interested in the weight of tests in your overall grade? So in a class, you're interested in how much the tests are worth. That would be a great thing to do on a pie chart because you're thinking about it in terms of relative to everything else in the class, how much they're worth in the class. For a bar graph, a good example would be your performance on tests in a class. So now, instead of talking about how much it is relative to the other assignments, I'm interested in how the tests are going towards each other, how well you're performing. And in that case, a bar graph might be a better comparison way of doing that, to look at your highest test versus your low and by how much. Okay, so let's do an example where we actually make one by hand, which is a little bit cumbersome. Okay, I admit that because drawing a pie chart is actually a little bit different freehanding it, but I'm going to do my best. Let's make a bar chart of this. So let's say a sweater. A sweater is 55% cotton, 40% nylon, and 5% acrylic. That's supposed to be one word. Acrylic. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to do a pie chart and then a bar graph of this. So let's start with the pie chart. And I get it. My circle's not going to be perfect and neither is yours. If you want to get a perfect circle, great. I applaud you. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Not too bad. A little squished, but that's all right. I can handle it. Okay. So here we go. 55%. So to draw 55%, I'm going to need to do more than half, right? More than half. Oops. Pretending that's half. Okay, so more than half. Well, here, for the moment, I'm going to go half. I'm going to do exactly what half is. And then if this was a quarter, 25%, I need to kind of think of this as 5 wedges here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I'm trying to wedge them out here without being too terrible. Let me do it out here a little further. There we go. That's better. Okay, a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and put it right about there. I don't really need all those dash marks. This is how you'd be precise drawing it by hand. Well, actually, you'd get a protractor, but that's okay. Okay, so this is going to be, here, I'll use my highlighter. So this category right here, that's cotton. At 55%. Okay, the next category, nylon is 40%. Oh, here, let's do acrylic because I kind of measured out the wedge for 5%. Let's do that. So let's do acrylic. Oops. Okay, thank you. All right, so I kind of visualized it to be about here. I'm going up top just to try to draw it up there. Okay, and let me get a different highlighter color. Let's do pink. Why not? Cool. All right. So that will be 5%. And I'll go ahead and label acrylic out here. And then the last category, I'll grab a blue. Thank you. I don't need that up anymore while I'm drawing. All right, there we go. So that is the nylon. All right, there we go. I did the best I could. It would be so much better if I used technology, but that's okay. We're just kind of getting an idea, trying to see visually what it would somewhat look like when you're comparing these categories to the whole. How much is one category versus the other? All right, let's do this now as a bar graph. Now it's in percentages. That's okay. Maybe I'll go by fives. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Oh, gotta go a little bit higher. Oops. Here, it's gonna get mad at me when there we go. All right. All right, there's 55. And this is 5. And then 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 here. I'm just going to label the ones I need. Okay. And I want to mention this. Whenever we draw bar graphs, we need to label each category. So I'm going to label the vertical axis as a percent. Okay. So we're talking about 55%, 40%, 5%. Okay. Now the x-axis, we are going to label the 3 actual material categories. So that would be cotton, nylon, acrylic. And I'll label that then as the material. All right. Okay, now let's go ahead and draw our rectangles for each category. So 55% cotton is the tallest. Nylon at 40% will go right here. I'm going to try my best to make the rectangles equal length. Do my best, like to make them about the same width. And then acrylic is 5%, so that's down here. And there we go. All right, my tick mark's a little bit off on that one. That's okay. Now, quick comment. Bar graphs will always have spaces between the rectangles. Okay, always. It's different. It's a different type of graph when they don't have spaces. So bar graph has spaces. All right. So that's on purpose. The rectangles should be separated like that. But other than that, it's done. We've got the comparisons. One's a little bit easier to draw than the other. I think the bar graph is definitely easier to draw than to do the pie chart, but the pie chart has some use, and there you go.